is the Week in Review at the Abbeville Instiute. Here is your host, Brian McClanahan.
Welcome back to the Week in Review at the Abbeville Institute. This is your host, Brian McClanahan, and this is episode 170, covering the week of May 20th through May 24th, 2019. Glad to have you back in the program. Very glad to be here. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Abbeville Institute, like our Facebook page at Abbeville Institute, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube page at Abbeville Institute. If you want to support the Institute, go to abbevilleinstitute.org. You see a button there that says support. Under that, you'll have donor options, and you can donate monthly, annually, or a one-time donation. And of course, all your donations are tax-deductible to the full extent of law and help the Abbeville Institute explore what is true and valuable in the Southern tradition. So consider a tax-deductible donation to the Institute. Also, while you're at abbevilleinstitute.org, give us an email address. We'll give you a free ebook, and then you'll get in our email list. You'll get our Daily Dose of Dixie Monday through Friday, and our weekly email on Saturday or Sunday, which includes a link to this podcast. You can also go to your favorite app store, whether it's on Apple device or a Windows device, and you can download our mobile application. So you can get the Abbeville Institute on the go. It's free of charge. And of course, you get our podcast through that, all of our lectures, hundreds of those, and a mobile access to the website. So go out there and get our mobile application, again, free of charge. Great way to stay in contact with the Institute. You can also get your Abbeville Institute apparel at the webpage, abbevilleinstitute.org. Get that support button again. You'll see when you click on that tab, it'll drop down and it'll say shop. Click on that shop button and it'll take you out. You can get our embroidered apparel, our t-shirts, hats, golf shirts, all kinds of great stuff. So go out and get your Abbeville Institute apparel. It's a great way to support the Institute and advertise the Institute while you're walking around town. And don't forget, our summer school is coming up in July. The end of July. Space is running out. Here we are at the end of May. We've got very little space left. So if you want to get into the summer school, it is going to be a great time. Reconstruction in the New South is the topic. You want to contact Dr. Livingston. If you go to our webpage, again, abbevilleinstitute.org, in the middle of the page, you'll see a little tab that says you're invited, or a little section that says you're invited. Click on that link. It'll take you out, give you all the information about how to get in contact with Dr. Livingston and get in on the summer school. We do have scholarships available, so you're going to want, if you are an advanced high school student, undergraduate, college undergraduate, or graduate student, we do have some scholarships available, so you want to capitalize and take advantage of that and get in there and get a scholarship. Okay, let's talk about the material for the week. And it is a fun week because essentially the entire week was dedicated to pushing back against fake news or SJW nonsense, which there's a lot of that. Okay, so one of the things we see on a regular basis, whether you're talking about the Institute or you're talking about just overall in American society right now, is an effort by the SJWs to tear down monuments and to tear down anything that is traditionally American. So it's not just monuments. It's also renaming streets, renaming schools, going out and doing anything they can to ensure that any vestige of traditional American society is wiped out. Because, of course, under their distorted view of America, America is just an awful place, particularly the South. The South was just an awful place. I mean, there's nothing redeeming about it. It's just a bunch of racist slave owners who hated everybody. And these people should not be celebrated at all. There should be nothing about their accomplishments. There should be nothing about their life that's celebrated. Even going so far as to say, well, we need to get rid of America's founding documents because they are racist. We need to get rid of, we need to take down statues of Thomas Jefferson or George Washington because they're racist. But no mention of Abraham Lincoln, even though he's also racist. But see, he has a redeeming quality because he, quote unquote, freed the slaves, which he really didn't do. But that's okay. I mean, the Lincoln myth is so pervasive and stupid that it's a real problem. But not just that. We got to get rid of everything that has anything to do with an America that was racist. And so, funny enough, the Institute published a picture on our Facebook page of John F. Kennedy standing in front of a Confederate flag, and a comment that he made in North Carolina about how he loves the South because the South loves their history and it's a vital part of America. So I guess John F. Kennedy now needs to be purged because he was racist. I mean, or was with racist. I mean, this is how the lunatics and the SJW fringe view things. I mean, you do anything like that, and these lunatics will go out and say, well, that needs to happen. That needs to happen. So we've got statues to Kennedy and places named after Kennedy. All that needs to come down now, because clearly Kennedy associated with racist. So this is where we are in 2019, and it's really embarrassing for the American education system. But of course, I don't think all that's necessarily to blame at all times. It's pretty awful when you look at particularly higher education, when you get university level and what college students are being taught when they get there. But not just that. This also has to do with social media and other platforms that are you're able to circulate stupidity on a regular basis. I mean, I've gone after the Twitter historians who circulate stupidity because they have tens of thousands of followers, and these people eat up everything they say, and most of it is just snarky, stupid nonsense. I mean, and it's not just the left; it's also those on the so-called right who have a belief that somehow the Republican Party was founded to end slavery, which it never was, that no Republican ever owned slaves, which, of course, many did. But somehow this is, the Republican Party is exonerated, and this is playing this stupid political game, ours are good, D's are bad. But that's where so people like Dinesh D'Souza are as much a problem, or David Barton are as much a problem as, say, Kevin Cruz on Twitter. This is where you have a real situation where it's a left-right nationalist myth coalition against real America. When American history was defined by the South in so many ways up until even during the war, if the Union did not have Southerners, they would not have won that war. And so you have people like Richard Brookhiser out there saying, well, nobody pays attention to George Thomas. Well, certainly Southerners did at the time. I mean, they recognized George Thomas was a Southerner. They recognized that George Thomas, they considered him to be a traitor to the South, but they recognized him as a Southerner. And so, look, without George Thomas, the war goes differently for the Union, without question. At the beginning of the war, Winfield Scott was the highest-ranking Union officer, a Southerner. So Abraham Lincoln is marginally a Southerner, being born in Kentucky. But, so the Southerners recognized this. They understood it. The South, you had Southerners who were not in line with secession, and they didn't secede. So this did happen, and the Southerners were quite aware of it. The fact is, the South really did define America for a long period of time. And it was bigger than just race. And, anyone with half a brain knows that. So this is what we try to do at the Institute, to explore what's true and valuable in the Southern tradition, to talk about the things that matter to the South, that matter in the Southern tradition today, where the South can offer a stinging critique of modern American society, and it can do it so very easily. There's so many ways. You go out and you read Southern history, and you read the intellectual leaders in Southern history, and they have just profound things to say about society, and they still apply to modern society. And remember, Southern history is not just 4 years of the Confederacy; it's 400 years. 400 years of Southern history. When you look at things like banking and the critique that Southerners leveled on centralized banking or centralized power in government. These are the things that are very important. Or modern industrial society and what Southerners had to say about that. Or modern education, what Southerners had to say about that. There's so many different things we can talk about with the Southern tradition that are still valuable today, that it's important to keep it alive. It's important to push back against the fake news that goes out and says, well, these people are just all a bunch of racists, so we can't listen to anything they say. If that's the case, then we're just going to have to wipe out most of Western civilization, which, frankly, is the goal. They don't say it. Not everyone. Some people do. They openly say it. Western civilization is evil. It has to go. But, frankly, that's the goal, to wipe out Western civilization before about 1975. This is really Orwellian. And it's not just a phrase anymore. George Orwell's 1984 was not supposed to be a guidebook. It was at all. And this is where we are today, where it's being used as a guidebook. This is what you do. You take history and you twist it and it means something else. We use a nice sounding name, but it really means something else. And then, or you say, well, this is, you take a historical event and you twist it and you contextualize it to mean something else. And we've got several pieces this week that focus on that. I mean, that was really the theme of the week, with the exception of the book review, which is, well, I'll talk about that too. But we started the week with a piece by Alan Mendenhall entitled Think Progress Publishes Fake News. Now, this Alan Mendenhall is a lawyer. And Alan Mendenhall spoke at our conference in November of last year on nullification, secession, state interposition, federalism, these kind of things. Decentralization, essentially, was the theme of the conference. And it was just a discussion of where we are in modern society. And is America too big? Where we're going with this? What does this mean for America in the 21st century? We have all these clashes and all these things, this culture war. Would it not be better to have an actual conversation with people on the other side and try to understand the other side and try to have other people try to understand us? The problem is that nobody ever tries to understand. No one ever goes out and reads the literature that's available on the Southern tradition, except for written by a bunch of hack leftists who want to just trash the South. They don't go out and read necessarily, say, St. George Tucker. They don't go out and read John Taylor of Caroline. They don't do it. Why? Because it would undermine their entire position. But not just that. The idea that these groups can actually talk and get along if they just recognize their differences and maybe parted ways or had some type of structure, government structure that would facilitate these type of differences. I mean, this is what federalism really is. The historical federalism that was ratified in the Constitution. This is what it is. So we had a conversation to talk about this. Where are we? How can people discuss these things, these ideas? And where does the Southern tradition fit into all that? Does the Southern tradition offer a critique of this, or does the Southern tradition offer a potential guidebook for this? I mean, so we had this conversation. And of course, Think Progress, which is a leftist think tank, sent a reporter, and we knew he was there. We actually, said, yeah, come on in. We don't have anything to hide. Of course, all these lectures are available on YouTube, free of charge. They're all out there, so you can go watch them. But this Think Progress reporter published, his name was Casey Michel, or his name is Casey Michel. He published two pieces that were hit pieces. And essentially what they did is said, well, here's this group that's a bunch of racists, and they had Cal Exit come out there, and he gave a talk, which is, Cal Exit is a leftist California secession movement, just for informational purposes. What's going on in California? This is what these people are saying. We in California have looked at the Southern tradition, and this is what we've gotten out of it. So why don't we just have a situation where we discuss this idea of secession? So we had a discussion, and of course now everything is racist. So of course this greatly offended Alan Mendenhall, whose wife is Hispanic. And so this piece with Alan Mendenhall's picture, calls these people white supremacists. And he took this piece apart like a skilled surgeon. He just eviscerated Casey Michel in his stupid piece. He asked them for comment. They wouldn't. And so he just took them apart. It is one of the most beautiful pieces how can I describe this thing? It is a lawyer's brief in essence. So it's not just a polemic. It is an argumentative piece that lays out in a beautiful case method his positions. And so when you read it, you're left with essentially a liable lawsuit that could be filed on this. The fact is, the Think Progress pieces were just a bunch of trash. They're fake news, as Alan called it. But that's what happens. You get the leftists, they come in, they just use platitudes and slogans. They don't actually do any reporting or anything. They don't actually go out there and seek to find the answers. They just say, oh, these people are just racist. They're just racist. There's nothing valuable about that. They're just racist. Well, I mean, show me an example of that. And of course, as Alan points out, how can you call the Instiute that? I mean, they've published pieces praising Jimmy Carter. They've published pieces praising civil rights. They've published pieces by various minority writers. How can you say these people are anything but interested in the Southern tradition, in the diverse Southern tradition that it is? How can you say that? That's a slanderous attack. But this is what they do. And of course, he points out that the Institute is not we don't have extensive financial resources, which is why we ask that you support our cause. We don't have extensive financial resources. It's not like we're running around with, hundreds of millions of dollars and we can do whatever we want. We're not the now discredited SPLC. So the fact is, this piece just took apart Casey Michel and showed it to be his pieces to be the garbage they are. And so why anyone would pay attention to stupid people like Think Progress, Ian Millhiser, and he's another Twitter historian brigade. I mean, he's more like the Twitter legal brigade. And he thinks it's cool to use foul language. I mean, it's like he's 13 years old. So this is where these people are just idiotic. But I love this piece by Alan. He pushes back. And the other funny thing is another piece we had this week, Show Me Where the Statue Hurt You, by Michael Martin. A lot of people don't realize Michael Martin's wife is African American. So here's this guy, Michael Martin, that's being called a racist all the time. His wife is African American. So, that's really interesting. It's just like when Time on the Cross was published in the 70s. One of the authors has an African American wife, and again, these people are racist. They published this book that's not critical enough of slavery. These people must be white supremacist racists. And well, wait a second here. I think it was Fogel. I think Fogel has an African American wife. How can you say that? This is where the stupidity comes in, and these people just keep stepping in it all the time. So it's funny when you do these, when you have these pieces come out and people just make these accusations. They have no idea who they're talking to or talking about. And here we are. So I would highly recommend you read Alan Mendenhall's piece. It's really good. Then we had the piece on Wednesday, An Epic Poem in Bronze by Shane Anderson. And so you see this, and I've seen this with Ian Millhiser. In fact, Ian Millhiser, I'm not allowed to follow Ian Millhiser anymore on Twitter because I asked him a simple question one time. I said, show me one speech that says that any of the Confederate monuments were explicitly built to promote white supremacy. Just give me one speech. And so the speech that came back was the Julian Carr speech from the Silent Sam dedication in 1913. So this is the speech, and of course, he didn't say the statue is built for white supremacy. He gave an ugly story during the speech. But that is a speech that's used as evidence that these statues were put up for white supremacy. Of course, what people don't know about Carr, he was also a benefactor of the Training School for Colored People, is the title of the school, Training School for Colored People in Augusta, Georgia. So he was actually a progressive in the early 20th century. And of course, what happens here is they pull out that one little segment and then don't talk about the rest of the speech. They don't talk about the other dedication speeches, which had nothing to do, nobody said a word about race. I mean, you could say that these people were racist. Of course, I mean, that would not be a stretch to say these people were racist. So was most of America in 1913. I mean, you could say the people that are dedicating these statues in the North at the same time to Union soldiers were racist because many of them were. That was just a given in early 20th century America. So, I mean, where's the story? Where's the story? And where's the story? Right? Does that mean that the statue was put up for those particular reasons? No, of course it wasn't. But this is where we are. So the Carr speech that everyone quotes, and he quotes it. He says, I trust I may be pardoned for one allusion, howbeit it is rather personal. 100 yards from where we stand on Franklin Street, less than 90 days perhaps after my return from Appomattox, I horsewhipped a Negro wench until her skirts hung in shreds, because upon the streets of this quiet village she had publicly insulted and maligned a Southern lady. and then rushed for protection to these university buildings where was stationed a garrison of 100 federal soldiers. I performed the pleasing duty in the immediate presence of the entire garrison, and for 30 nights afterwards slept with a double-barreled shotgun under my head. So Anderson continues, hey, it's an ugly story, no doubt. It's also an anomaly when placed in context of Carr's entire speech, and certainly when compared with the other speeches given at the memorial's dedication. Now, all of this stuff is available for people to just go out and read. And he goes through the speech. He goes through the speeches. He goes through the dedication ceremony. He says in his short remarks introducing the governor London, who was Major Henry London, who was a journalist, lawyer, and author of a Civil War diary of his time, as a UNC student during the war. He introduced the governor. And of course, in his speech, his dedication speech, he established a theme for the day. He said, quote, as one of the students of this university who left its halls to serve as a soldier of the Confederacy following Lee to Appomattox, I appreciate most highly this monument erected in memory of my comrades, both dead and living. So the monument is erected in memory of his comrades, both dead and living, not for anything else. May it forever remain as an object lesson to teach all future generations that duty is the sublimest word in the English language, and that the sons of this university were willing to suffer and, if need be, sacrifice their lives in their devotion to duty. We thought then we were right, and now we know it. The governor, he said, then continued the theme, reciting the number of dead and wounded who had left the university and gone to war, praising their patriotism. Quote, the statue is a memorial to their chivalry and devotion. It is an epic poem in bronze. Its beauty and its grandeur are not limited by the genius of the sculptor. The soul of the beholder will determine the revelation of its meaning. It will remind you and those who come after you of the boys who left these peaceful classic shades for the hardships of armies at the front, for the fierce carnage of titanic battles, for suffering and for death. We unveil and dedicate this monument today as a covenant, that we too will do our task with fidelity and courage. Mary Williams was the next speaker, and she said, quote, poor is a country that boasts no heroes, but beggared is that people who, having them, forget. The South has her heroes, her immortals who add glory to American history, and we of the South revere, and we of the South remember. This is what John F. Kennedy said. This is why he loves the South. May this shaft prove an inspiration to the students here as they come and go, and may they remember that such courage and fidelity as those boy soldiers displayed made it possible for the fame of Lee, Jackson, and Johnson to be lifted higher and higher until they wrote their names among the stars. So this is what people said. And then Julian Carr spoke. There's other speeches here. This is what Julian Carr said besides that little talk. He said, quote, they fought not for conquest, not for coercion, but from a high and holy sense of duty. They were like the Knights of the Holy Grail. They served for the reward of serving. They suffered for the reward of suffering. They endured for the reward of enduring. They fought for the reward of duty done. They served, they suffered, they endured. They fought for their childhood homes, their firesides, the honor of their ancestors, their loved ones, their own native land. So that's what Julian Carr said the statue was actually about. But no. It's about one little portion of that speech where these idiots run around with megaphones. I mean, really, they're idiots. This is what we have. We have a bunch of stupid people running around with megaphones that don't know anything. And so this is what you get. And this is what the Silent Sam dedication was actually about. But no, it's about something else to these idiots on Twitter. And I fully mean that. These people are idiots. They might have PhDs, but they're really stupid. So the going and digging into the actual speeches themselves provides a much different picture of this particular monument. Of course, he provides all of the documents that show where these speeches came from. I mean, here's a guy who's an amateur historian. He's not a PhD. He's just a guy that reenacts. And he said, you know what? I'm going to go out and actually look for what the speeches actually said. And this is what he came back with. Oh, okay, so this is what the speeches actually say. Oh, gee, you have to leave it to a guy. I mean, the PhDs, the professionals can't go out and do this, but the amateurs can. The people that are paid to go out and actually do real research can't find this stuff. And when you ask them, hey, show me one example. They give you a book, David Blight's Race and Reunion, which is a stupid book. There's one redeeming chapter in that entire book. All the rest of it is just ridiculously stupid. It was funny because after I had this conversation, one said, I give him to offer a penetrating review of David Blight's Race and Reunion. So I did. I actually posted the link. I just went ahead and did my own podcast. I have my own podcast. If you don't know, I do the Brian McClanahan show as well. But I went out and just did a review of it. And then I posted that. And of course, crickets, nothing, because they thought I was some hayseed who didn't know anything. So we get to the Michael Martin piece, and the title is, Show Me Where the Statue Hurt You. And this is funny. He actually attended there was a rally by one of these SJW groups in Charleston to tear down the John C. Calhoun statue. Of course, that's under attack. This event was hosted by a group called the Independent Media Instiute, which again is Orwellian. That's very independent, just like Southern Poverty Law Center. It's these phrases that are used. The Independent Media Institute. It's really not. It's a bunch of SJW idiots who want to run around with megaphones and throw human fecal material on statues. This is what they get. This is what these people do. So Michael Martin bravely goes out. Michael Martin, he has an African American wife. He goes out and he has a sign that says, "Show me where the statue hurt you." Show me where the statue hurt you. And the people get in his face. He said, "I immediately could tell that both my presence and the sign were triggering the protesters, as many of them began whipping out their camera phones to record me. I listened carefully as one protester sang Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday, a song about lynching. Another read a passage from a book about the Hamburg Massacre and Ben Tillman. Another who kept referring to Charleston as Black Charleston. There were signs in front of the protesters displaying that read, 40 years, racism turned Slaveport into all-white city, people united to live and let live, and gentrification in South Carolina is just like apartheid in South Africa. Little to no facts about Calhoun were mentioned." He says, "What do these absurd signs mean? When did John C. Calhoun become a Confederate? Welcome to the reality of the social injustice warriors, where facts and logic are trumped by emotion." This is true. We live in an emotivist society, and this is really one of the problems of the modern American society. Nobody has any logic or thought. They just have emotions. It's like they're a bunch of 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds throw fits. These SJWs are just 2-year-olds. They run around throwing fits. Crying. Chanting. There's no intellectual discourse here. It's just a bunch of stupidity. Little petulant toddler temper tantrums. He says, after one protester who stood for the microphone for 10 minutes chanting about slavery and racism, I yelled out, "We all agree with you on the slavery issue. We just do not want to see statues torn down." At this time, the crowd and cameras began to turn on me and chant things along the lines of racist and how dare you disagree with us. Of course, as I said, he has an African American wife. Right? So, clearly a racist. At this point, I responded by yelling over the protesters that John F. Kennedy headed a commission that ranked Calhoun as one of the top 5 senators of all time. One protester who clearly had no response shouted at the time, "Don't you know the original Citadel was built to control local slaves? How dare they turn this city into a hotel? Or how dare this city turn it into a hotel?" Excuse me. I responded by asking how she felt about Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, and the Haitian Revolution. She lost her mind and began screaming incoherently. When all the media cameras and protesters surrounded me, I dug in my heels in and got louder because I'm tired of seeing Southerners too afraid to stand up for themselves. Next thing I knew, local police surrounded me and escorted me out, citing that the people who had the permit asked the cops to forcibly remove me. When I asked why Antifa protesters were allowed to attack people, yet I can't hold a sign and speak my mind, the cop simply responded, "Get a permit." So we're living in Nazi Germany or America? But this is where we are. And he came out armed with facts. He's done this before. He talks about Calhoun. He goes out and says, well, what about this with Calhoun? Oh, no, these people don't know anything about Calhoun. It's just slogans, platitudes, and temper tantrums. John C. Calhoun's grave is actually the most visited grave of a vice president in America. It is. And, he is one of the most important Americans in American history, without question. Of course, now there's talk about taking his name out of Clemson University, which was his plantation. It's his property. But again, this is where we are in 2019. Then, of course, we have the piece on Friday, "The Truth No Longer Matters" by James Ronald Kennedy. And he talks about the fact that what we have now, and people will say, well, if they just learn the truth. He said, people don't care about the truth. That doesn't matter. What they care about is just tearing down Western civilization. He calls them neo-Marxists, which they are. But essentially what they want to do is tear down Western civilization. That's it. It's not about statues. It's really not about any of that. It's about tearing down Western civilization because that offends them. And so this is the issue. He says, thus we come to the ultimate question for those of us who wish to defend these permanent things which are our natural inheritance. How do we win a battle against neo-Marxists when our opponents do not accept Western values of truth, evidence, and logic? One thing is for certain, we do not win by trying to convince our enemies about the truthfulness of our claims. We win not by convincing them. He says we win by destroying them. How do we destroy them? Not by making a frontal assault against the strongholds of the mainline media, academia, or political establishments. Yes, we educate about our education, but our education must be directed toward the vast majority of passive Southerners, Joe Sixpack and Billy Bible, who are our natural allies. We motivate to activate. We activate to bring social and political pressure on our elected officials. So he says, look, I mean, you've got to you can't worry about these people in many ways. You got to go after, you got to educate. This is what the Abbeville Institute does. Now, of course, our role is educative. If people want to take that and do what they want with it, they can do that. We don't advocate candidates or anything like that. We just simply educate. And this particular piece is interesting because he says, look, I mean, these leftists, they're not rational people. They're emotional people. And so you can't really, your truth isn't going to matter to them. Truth isn't going to matter to them. Now, finally, we have a piece, and I'm running up against the time here. Our review of, our book review of the week, which is actually 2 books by Clyde Wilson. They're 2 19th century books on the Southwest. And he mentions how both these were highly acclaimed books in the 19th century, and both were written by Southerners. And both of these individuals, he concludes, both writers were strong patriots of the Republican America that they knew, explaining why both ultimately served in the Confederate Army. I mean, it's a great concluding line, right? But they talk about the Southwest and what they found there. They're really interesting stories. And, of course, we had these, and they're free of charge. I mean, we've got the link provided. You can go click on that. But it shows, that Southerners at one time, their role in things and what they thought about the Southwest and their role in America, their role in early America, and how important antebellum Southerners actually were. Southern history was really American history for much of our collective history in the United States. All right. Well, all that said, hope you enjoyed this week. We had a lot of great material. Go out there and read it. And until next time, good day.